Chapter 5 Gunrunning Lecture 5 Old Earth 800 kilometers from the former country of Terra. The former Spectre Command Outpost was an isolated fort located on the abandoned Faroe Islands. It was a relic once used to safeguard Iceland from the avarice of the earliest European coalition after it was secured from Denmark. Terra and its people had found a new use for it. Being only 800 kilometers away, a short 20-minute flight from the homeland made it easily accessible to the main fleet and allowed for a joint operation. This location also allowed for early interception of any invading forces and segregation from civilian life. As Azuriel stands inside the cavernous halls of the once illustrious fort, a bit of dust speckles from the ceiling. The light ominously flickers, hardly functioning in the facility's dilapidated state. He calmly looks around, surveying the thick, stagnant air. His silence is broken with an advanced HUD appearing before his eyes, highlighting the interior with a detailed radiograph. Moments later, an entire draft of the compound emerges, ready for instant access. His new staggering form encompasses the former military insignia embellishing the entrance hall, and with haste, various Talon troops gather around him. Each one keeps his distance, respectfully, with dread, towards their Titan leader. With the relaxed nature of this fort's capture, several take advantage of downtime to gawk his new armor and admire the handiwork of the master engineer. No threat has been scouted in these ruins. However, a highly acclaimed general is along for the ride, a general who, in her prime, led the removal of all mercenaries and their inferior genetics by Terra's command. With her appearance, it would seem as though she would be the one to control this new program. However, her intentions are always furtive in their grand design. The general slowly makes her way in through the front, sauntering around with a dour smile. Her journey stops in front of Azuriel, and with dramatic flair, she twists to face him. "So, how do you enjoy your new home, Pride?" His new alias rings loudly within his mind, breaking him from his survey. Peering down to the gaunt officer before him, he bows his head in salute.
"It is serviceable. The main foundation appears to be without flaw."
Azuriel looks around his hut a bit more, still getting used to its layout.
"The electronics are defunct, and the interior is eroded as well."
The general's grin perks up a bit at his words. "It would seem as though that fancy new suit is doing you some good already, isn't it?" Azuriel pauses, then nods in return.
"Aye, Brigadier."
She clicks her tongue and bats a hand at him. "I hate that. Just say ma'am. Straight rank is too formal." The armor lightly clinks as his posture stiffens.
"Aye, ma'am."
Suddenly she twists herself back to the main hall, giving it a good look as well. Obviously displeased with its appearance, she lifts her left wrist to her chest. The gauntlet slides a small hatch open, projecting an image in front of her. A calm silhouette shines brightly against the general's face, and the figure of another Talon officer quickly appears. "Start unpacking. I want this area operating in 2 hours." Before the officer can even acknowledge, the general shuts the hatch manually. She places her hand on her hips and calls behind her in a derisive tone. "Pride, go ahead with the group." She points off across the main hall into a random room. "Whenever you're ready, meet me in the command center for briefing." Her demeanor and attitude are calm, if somewhat crass, yet strictly authoritative. Not once does she even flaunt her rank. She simply gives an order, and it is done. Without any other utterance, she simply struts back outside, leaving the Talons and the new Spectre to her will. A light breeze bellows forth through the main doors, sending scattered papers and dust into a whirlwind. Azuriel lets a brief sigh escape without muting his helmet. Eyes shift in his direction as his shoulders relax. A senior enlisted Talon walks up and knocks on his abdominal plate.
"I didn't think even something like you would dance up around her."
Azuriel shrugs, looking at him with a half-cocked leer.
"Brigadier General Kelly isn't one to be trifled with. I could sneeze in her direction, and she might just take my new plate away."
Taking a few steps forward, he stops short of a desk. What was formerly a pristine slice of mahogany is nothing more than dried-out tinder. A light tap from his boot immediately turns it into sawdust where his boot has struck.
"I can't quite say why she would even bother tagging along. This landmass has been long deserted."
Azuriel kneels down and pinches a few grains of the desk dust, kneading it between his power-armored fingers.
"Besides that, I never cared for politics or the higher command. I simply do as I must."
Azuriel stands back up, facing to the Talon.
"No, that Sergeant, lest you enjoy the fact an officer born infirm child."
The sawdust in his hand starts to grind into a delicate powder, finer than the grains of moon dust.
"A hybrid child among us, who outranks you at that."
These words strike the Talon with disgrace.
But what of you, Pride? Are you not Talon anymore?
Azuriel pauses and glances down to his hand, now cleansed of any particles.
I suppose not entirely, but I still fight for Terra. At least I believe I will not have to obey any of his commands.
He scoffs, regaining his composure. Standing tall before them, his presence shifts along with the entire room. Azuriel commands forth, sending the various Talons across different paths. He may be the first Spectre, but he chose to honor them by allowing them to be the first to secure his new home. Knowing full well the task will be completed, his concerns draw to a close. Another short glance around and a shake of the head, and Azuriel is on his way to the command center. The entire area has been scanned, and a mini-map displays in the corner of his vision. A simple overhead layout that enables the viewer to maneuver through any location without getting turned around. Although the fort was abandoned, it never did see any direct fire. As Azuriel moves through the corridors, he contemplates the uses of such a building. The foundation is decent, along with the underground vault, although topside is rickety. It was not engineered by Terra. Primitive cement and wood structuring lack longevity. He thinks about the appearance of General Kelly. It seems she already has it under control, though. His thoughts focus once again as he reaches a pair of electronic doors. According to his map, the command center is through those doors. Despite having handles, with hardly any electricity, it would seem the doors would remain closed unless they are penetrated. Simply striking his fist crumples a door, warping it completely out of its frame. Upon seeing this, Azuriel merely walks through the rubble of the twin doors, and gives no resistance as it wraps around his armor before finally splintering apart. A network of ancient computers and consoles fills the cavernous room. Each one served a different purpose, but the applications are forever lost to time. Luckily, this room contains its own generator, even if the only remaining connections is the automated lights, which spastically flicker in place before harmoniously buzzing and lighting up the room. Azuriel scorns at the inferior technology and walks through the room until he reaches the center. There he folds his arms and begins to patiently wait for General Kelly. A half hour passes by, and with the field engineer's fruitful work, the entire facility clings to life. All lights flip on, and many of the remaining still intact computers flicker to life as well. Various commands and radio chatter flutter across the communications before light explosions quake through the ground. Chunks of debris and unusable exterior walls are excavated and removed. It would seem the plan was to remove the entire top portion either way, but oddly enough, this information was not directed to Azuriel's attention. While still quite rickety, the compound now seems much more alive. General Kelly saunters through the main corridor leading to the command center, reading a mini-map on display she wears on her wrist. She stops short of the entrance and quietly inspects the doors, which have been forcibly folded inward. She admires the handiwork as she runs her hands across the metal. With a chuckle, she approaches the center of the room where Azuriel still stands. "You do know that those doors had handles?" Azuriel uncrosses his arms respectfully.
It seemed easier just to go through.
Kelly raises a finger as her mouth opens slightly, only to form into a grin. "I suppose I can't argue with that logic." She presses a few buttons on the screen on her wrist. "You should be getting the mission details directly to your suit now." Azuriel perks his head up in surprise.
Mission? I thought this was our current mission.
Kelly eyes him up and down before cocking her head back. "This was my mission, to secure you a separated area of operation away from civilian life." As she lowers her arm back down, a wave of information flashes across Azuriel's visor. Files and folders spew across the screen as he tries to manually separate each piece as many details flow into his consciousness. He grips the front of his helmet with a soft groan. About 36 hours ago, a payment of decommissioned Terra weaponry was lost by the Japanese government. It would appear one of the notorious syndicates, the Yakuza, found an opportune time to take possession of this firepower. Azuriel hears these simple details and starts to lay out several questions.
My apologies, ma'am, but why would Terra be involved in this? We sold them inferior tech, and they lost it. Let them get it back, no?
Kelly swiftly shakes her head in disapproval. "Those firearms, even if old, are still our work. The crime syndicate has no right to such weaponry." She begins to stroke her chin. "Besides that, they have offered a considerable lump sum." Immediately, he is struck with disbelief. The great General Kelly, who disbanded the last mercenaries, is now condoning a contract from a foreign country, much like mercenary work.
Is this a joke? We're going to be torn apart and rebuilt and plastered inside his armor just to do foreign contracts?
Kelly snaps back at him, chastising him for his tone. "You do realize that little surgery drained all of Terra's coffers, right? Or perhaps you've become arrogant now that you have been gifted with such a prize." Bowing his head, Azuriel bites his tongue.
I I understand, ma'am. That was out of place.
Kelly cuts him off. I would expect better of you, Pride. We may have to take several contracts such as this just so we can simply get some more revenue. Having just one of you won't be enough if we are to properly secure our borders. Her hand tightens and balls into a fist. Whatever actions we take will be necessary for Terra's survival, even if a little unsavory. A sigh escapes her lips, and the room grows quiet. Did you get all the information you need? A Tenaya friend is waiting for you outside. Azuriel snaps back to attention and confirms her orders. Without speaking again, he simply turns and makes his way back out through the front of the building into the courtyard. Lust bubbles up in Azuriel as he beholds the magnificent beast of machinery that awaits him. The Obsidian Hellfire is a special gas-based transport jet capable of traveling anywhere in the world within 5 hours. The beast sports 2 forward-facing magnetically electrocharged Gatling Gauss cannons with a perpetual magnet engine. It is capable of using up to 12 drop pods and is the crown jewel of Terra's air superiority. If only any nation were to not hear this demon approaching from kilometers away. While normal Hellfires are capable of most of these feats, only the Obsidian Hellfire uses Spectre tech. It would appear the Mach II was not the only piece of instrumentation Kailis toyed with. Much like the armor, the Obsidian now has cloaking technology, and the windshield can also transfer between normal and thermal vision. However, it did not seem he fixed the engine noise, which, in hindsight, also made the cloaking useless. Perhaps enemies felt the immediate fear of the unknown when they heard the dreadful screech and were not able to see where it came from. That is, if they were able to catch it with the naked eye to begin with. All that Azuriel can instantly notice is the prestigious paint job, a shade of midnight mixed with moonlit particles. Swirled and twisted tiger stripes run along the vehicle's length. Only the open back hatch hints at the purpose of this craft. Upon closer inspection, Azuriel glimpses several smudge marks along the sides. The smudges almost look like facial expressions, and his only conclusion is that several talons or scribes had walked right into it without ever noticing it was there. Azuriel cannot help but realize this during his inspection, forcing out a smirk and a chortle. He finishes his quick look and trots his way up the back ramp. Waiting within is a single pilot. Evening, Pride. Pleasure to be your chauffeur today and fly this magnificent beauty. The pilot pats the side of the interior with her open palm. Other airframe don't have such thick plating. I heard it is also a little faster than the others too. Keeping himself quiet, Azuriel closes the back hatch before taking a few steps towards the center. His helmet unfolds, and he is finally able to get fresh air.
Pleasure, Lieutenant. I hate to sound rude, but I'd like to take care of this as quickly as possible.
The young pilot nods and smiles gleefully in Azuriel's direction. Not a problem. What's the destination? Azuriel pauses for a moment, taken slightly aback.
They didn't prep you?
The pilot dips her head to the side and shrugs. Well, they said it was need to know. Just told me to take you where you wanted to go. Not that I'm complaining, though. Just look at With a sharp clearing of his throat, Azuriel catches her attention again. His suit magnetically locks to the floor as he prepares for departure. Closes his eyes and commands her.
Start the engines and get us airborne. I have a mess to clean up.
The pilot hops to with a salute and happily settles into the cockpit. A shy purr hums as the engine kicks on and warms up, rapidly building as the wing blades spin to tempo. The pilot flips a switch and the magnetic coils kick into place, erupting in a howling roar like thunder. The boom subsides, and nearly every talent on the ground is holding their hands over their ears. If they didn't know any better, they would think a vicious, pissed-off Tyrannosaurus was on the loose. Azuriel moans with displeasure.
What the hell did he do to the engines?
He screams. With all the noise, he doesn't notice the craft is already airborne, hovering 5 kilometers above the fort. The pilot quickly presses another button, and the racket dies down. With bloodshot eyes, an obviously annoyed Azuriel contorts his face in anger. He holds his hands out before him as if to ask,
What gives?
The pilot apologizes. I forgot. They told me the inside needs dampeners if you aren't wearing a helmet. Forgive me, Pride. Azuriel waves her off, and she asks for his destination. He takes a slow breath and addresses her directly.
Take me to Kobe, Japan.